Hi everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul. Today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview of this motherboard from Gigabyte. This is the F2A85XM D3H. Now this is a micro ATX form factor motherboard, so it will fit in cases that support micro ATX or larger. You also have a socket FM2 socket, and that is designed for AMD Trinity series APUs, or accelerated processing units, and those are CPUs that have a GPU integrated, and AMD has done a great job with those. They actually have really powerful integrated graphics for an integrated graphics solution, and of course by way of that you get some of the features listed down here at the bottom. I should also mention though it's an ultra durable motherboard, so it does feature Gigabyte's ultra durable construction, which has stuff like a glass fabric PCB for humidity protection. More on that on the back of the box. We have triple monitor support directly from the connectors, the video out connectors on the motherboard itself, so HDMI, DVI, and D-Sub. Via the dual link DVI connector, you can actually do resolution up to 2560 by 1600. You have a dual UEFI, so that means you have two chips on the board. You can switch back and forth between them, so you can use that for BIOS recovery, or you can use that to set up a couple different settings on the two different UEFI BIOS chips, and then you can switch back and forth between them. You also get the 3D BIOS, which is a graphical depiction of your motherboard, which will help you click on different items to jump into, say, the memory configuration or the APU configuration. You can also switch to advanced mode if you like the old school advanced mode. It's Windows 8 ready. So the newer UEFI BIOS and the abilities of Windows 8 can enable some really fast boot times. Again, featuring the support for the A-series processors. Again, bear in mind, guys, there is FM1 and there's FM2. This is FM2, so don't get an FM1 APU for this motherboard. It will not be compatible. Go for FM2. There's a codename Trinity, and there's a lot of great options in that. AMD dual graphics technology, so when you purchase your APU, you'll notice that you can, in sort of a crossfire type setup, combine the APU's graphics processor with an additional add-on discrete graphics card and give yourself kind of a graphics boost by going with Crossfire X. I recommend checking out AMD's dual graphics website, because that will give you a better idea of which APUs will match up with which graphics cards, and also a better idea of whether you should go that route, going with the APU plus the graphics card, or if you just want to go with a higher end discrete graphics card, that is also of course an option. Eyefinity support, again, right out of the box. Ultra durable construction, features humidity protection, electrostatic protection, power failure protection, and high temperature protection. There's a little bit more information here. On the back of the box, of course, some of the stuff that I have already mentioned on the front of the box, but there's another look at it with some additional details and some charts and stuff that tell you why it's better. We also have on-off charging functionality, so you can charge your devices even while your computer is off via the powered USB ports. DirectX 11 support, of course. And lastly, we have some detailed specs here down in the bottom left. I'll give you guys a moment to take a closer look at those. I'm going to go ahead and proceed with an overview of the accessories. Okay guys, inside the box we have accessories, of course, documentation. Let me sort of parse through all these and I'll give you guys a better look at what's what. And then lastly, of course, the motherboard itself. And that looks to be about all there is. All right, multilingual installation guidebook, so you can use that if English is not your first language. This is the full installation guide, which is in English, I believe. Yeah, pretty much all in English. So if English is your first language, it's probably what you're going to be looking at. Here's a quick look. You get a table of contents, of course. It's kind of boring. What's next? All right, there's a layout of the motherboard. With some different specs. There's a block diagram, which I always like, so you can see what different components are connected to what and where through, because you have the AMD APU, which some devices connect to directly. You also have the A85X chipset, and that also will control quite a few things, such as your SATA 6 gigabit per second ports. And then finally, here we have a list of all the detailed components on the motherboard and their functions. It'll also kind of walk you through the installation process further on. You can also check out our How to Build a Computer video on our Newegg TV YouTube channel if you want some more help with that. Here is your AMD FM1, FM2 series utility DVD. This will probably have outdated utilities and drivers on it by the time you get it. It's very helpful if you need to particularly get your LAN port up and running so you can connect to the internet, but I recommend going to the Gigabyte website to download the latest versions of those drivers and utilities, because you'll get better compatibility and performance. Here are your serial ATA cables. You get a total of 4. They're all SATA revision 1, 2, and 3 compatible, so no worries if you're going to be using this for some high-performance SSDs, for example. In total, you get 4. 2 of them have straight plugs on both ends, and then 2 of them are going to have 90-degree angled plugs on one side. And then also they have the little metal clasps to help hold them in place. Finally, here's your input-output shield for the back of your case. And it's metal, it's got some little imprints on it so it can point out to you what is what. And that's all for accessories. This is a micro ATX form factor motherboard, so it should fit in most cases that are micro ATX compatible or larger. And the color scheme, as you can see, blue PCB in the background. We have whites and light blue components as well on a lot of the connectors on the board. Let me flip around to the back right quick to give you guys a closer look at the PCB, of course. Again, blue. You can see the back plate here for our FN2 socket, and then additional components such as a heatsink down here connected with plastic push pins. Back here to the front of the board, let me point out the fan connectors. We have a total of 3, so you get one CPU fan header, which is right here. I should also mention all of these fan headers are 4-pin PWM capable, so one CPU fan header right there, a system fan header right next to it, so you can use that for a system fan, or if you, for instance, have a CPU cooler that has 2 fans, you can plug them both in right there. And then finally one more system fan header, which is in the upper right there above the main 24-pin power connector. Next up, we're going to take a look at all of the detailed features of this motherboard. We're going to start way down here in the bottom right. Now the A85X chipset, which is right there underneath that Gigabyte logoed heatsink, controls a lot of the stuff on the motherboard, and one of the really awesome things about A85X is you actually get tons of SATA revision 3 6 gigabit per second ports. So you'll note 8 of them total right there. All of those again are natively controlled by the chipset. You also get some higher end RAID functionality out of those. Let me just double check my notes to make sure I'm telling you guys the right information. Yes, so RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10, as well as JBOD supported out of those, so you can actually get a ton of connectivity. SSDs, for example, of course, also perfectly suitable for mechanical hard drives or optical hard drives. I already mentioned this has a dual BIOS, so you'll notice the 2 BIOS chips right there. M BIOS is the main, B BIOS is the backup. You can set up a couple different configurations to switch back and forth, or you can simply use those for peace of mind while you're doing BIOS updates, because a power failure during a BIOS update is always something that can be worrisome. I recommend a backup power supply if you're really that worried about it. Okay, Gigabyte heatsink there again on the A85X chipset. Down here in the bottom middle of the board we have our front panel connectors. Let me pop this up a little bit so you guys can get a better look. So right here we have a little chart that's kind of telling you which is which for connecting those. You can also reference the motherboard manual and get those all wired up properly so your power buttons and reset buttons will work. You also have a clear CMOS header right there, so you can use that with a jumper to reset your UEFI to factory defaults. Over to the left, we have 2 USB 2.0 ports right there, so each one of those can power 2 USB 2.0 actual physical ports, so 4 of those total available right there. This black pinouts here is TPM, or Trusted Platform Module header. You also have a COM header right here, and finally audio for front panel. You also get a little SPDIF pinout right there, so you can connect that as well. Front panel audio will, generally speaking, connect up and set you up with front panel microphone and headphone jacks. On the left side here you'll notice several of the audio components. So your main audio is controlled by Realtek ALC887 codec audio chip. Supports 2, 4, 5.1 and 7.1 channel audio. And then moving on to the right of that we have our primary expansion slots. So these are going to be your PCI slots. You have a full-length PCI Express X16 here. You also have a physically full-length PCI Express X16 slot right here. This one's wired up for 4X. So if you are going to go with a discrete video card, definitely connect it to this top slot right there. You also have a PCI Express X1 slot here for an expansion card, and a legacy PCI slot right there. So if you have an older PCI device, you can plug that in and still use it, of course. Moving over to the right, we have the Gigabyte chipset that the Gigabyte heatsink for the chipset I already pointed out. Dual BIOS, of course. USB 3.0 header right here, so that's a 20-pin front panel USB, or front or rear panel, but this will control 2 USB 3.0 ports. This is also natively controlled by the A85X chipset, so that's another great feature of that. You actually get 4 total USB 3 ports on the board, 2 by way of this, and then 2 more on the rear panel. Here is your main 24-pin motherboard power connector, so make sure you wire that up from your power supply. Above that, your system fan header that I already pointed out, and then to the left of that we have our memory slots. So DDR3 memory slots right here, dual channel capable, so make sure you buy your memory in sets of 2, and identical pairs is going to be your best option, and then of course set them up in the color-coded slots to make sure you're getting dual channel capability. Again, you can reference the motherboard manual to make absolutely sure that you're setting that up correctly. Gigabyte's recommending 1.5 volt DDR3 DIMMs. Actually, total capacity available is up to 64 gigabytes, but that is only available if you're going with 16 gig DIMMs. And 16 gig DIMMs right now are kind of hard to come by. But you can go with 8 gig DIMMs for up to 32 gigs, or once 16 gig DIMMs become more popular, you can get just a lot of memory installed on this system, and it does support DDR3 overclock speeds of up to 1866, as well as XMP, or Extreme Memory Profile modules. Next to that, you have your FM2 socket. This is going to be have support for FM2 socket APUs from AMD only. So bear in mind there is an FM1 socket, or Fusion Medium 1, that is also out. The FM2 socket is newer and is not backwards compatible, so make sure you get an FM2 APU. The code name for those is Trinity. Of course, you can see these standard AMD mounting solutions here, which they've been going with for quite some time. So there's a really wide range of aftermarket CPU coolers, for example, that are available for that. Surrounding that, you have quite a bit of your componentry for power delivery, of course. You have an 8-pin supplemental CPU power connector up here in the top left. And then another item right here, these pinouts, which I haven't seen one of these for a while, but this is actually an LPT, or parallel connector right there, so you can wire that up with a ribbon cable. If you have an older LPT printer, for example, is the most common use I've seen for those. Let's finish up with our inputs and outputs in the rear of the motherboard. So first off, you have some USB 2.0. 2 of those right there, another 2 of those over here. You have a combo PS2 port right there for mouse or a keyboard. You have a D-sub, DVI, as well as HDMI outputs right there. And again, those are going to be for your AMD APU if you're going with one of those. Of course, you also have the option to do a discrete video card if that's your preference. You have a Toslink connector right there for an optical audio out. The other 2 USB 3.0 ports on the board, again, also natively controlled by the A85X chipset. Gigabit Ethernet here, provided by Realtek. Then finally, your analog audio connector. So the pink one there is mic. The other 2 are for analog audio connections. And again, bear in mind, this board does support 7.1 channel audio. If you do want to go 7.1, you'll need to use a combination of this, as well as the audio that's available via the front panel header. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, this has been the Gigabyte F2 A85XM D3H motherboard featuring the A85X chipset and the FM2 socket for AMD Trinity APUs. I'm Paul with Newegg TV, and if you enjoyed today's video, you can find more on our Newegg YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all next time on Newegg TV.